Right, so here we have S90V. We're going to put it in a test against a cinder block. This is what the edge is like to begin with. Now the purpose of this test, because all blades do take some degree of damage in this test, I'm just demonstrating that the knife will hold up well enough, or testing rather, to see if the knife will hold up well enough that even after all this damage, it's still in good enough condition to use. Now, this steel is not geared towards durability like some of the other knives that I make, and this knife holds an edge for an insanely long period of time, but I really don't know if it'll be as durable as the other ones in a test like this, so let's find out now. Okay, so this knife is the thinnest knife I've tested on a cinder block, and the thicker knives do perform better. I have videos where I test a Cpm 154 cm knife that's the same thickness as this, or thinner. It's a little thicker than this, and it does decent in the test. And I do one with a thicker one, and it does better in the test. So I can tell that there's a fair amount of damage. I mean, it's still quite functional. Not quite as tough as A2 tool steel. Well, then again, this is the thinnest knife I've ever tested. So let's see. So there's the damage. It starts back here, goes through there. So there is damage, but none of that damage even approaches the secondary bevel the whole way. It all stops before it gets there, which I'm actually pretty happy about, because that's how good most knives that are really well built do. And I'm gonna order some steel in the, or some steel in this, of this same type, but that's just a little bit thicker. So for how thin it is, I would consider this a pass, because the damage is limited. And the blade is still able to function decently well on the paper. Not fantastic. It is thinner though, and it did lose a lot of that edge. But of the knives that I've put through this test, I'd say that ranks among the pass. Honestly, I didn't know if it was going to break or not. This is 61 Rockwells, but it didn't break, it didn't deform, and the damage stayed on the edge. So it passes the cinder block test, because it really didn't lose that much. I thought it would be much bigger chips. I thought the damage would go beyond that secondary bevel right there, and that it would take big chips out, but looks like it's doing okay. I call that a pass. It's not as good of a pass as my thicker knives made of Cpm 154 cm and A2 tool steel, but for how thin it is, that's a pass. Right. So here we have the Antler test. Let's get my gloves back on for this. My eye protection. So this is the thinnest knife steel I've worked with, or close to the thinnest knife metal I've worked with. It's very, very thin stuff. S90V 61 Rockwells. Insanely good edge retention. Now I'm going to test it on this Antler. I'm going to go to this part that hasn't been damaged below the damage from the cinder block. So we're right there, and we're just going to see what happens. Okay, first two hits. Looks like no change. Gonna keep going. Okay. All right. So, okay. that antler was a little bit more dense than a lot of the ones that I pick. Okay, I'm looking here. It's looking pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, that portion on the antler. Here. Such a kind of small area. Okay. That's still very sharp. So that was a dense antler. So that is in fact a pass. Here, I'll get it down here. Okay, so between here and here is what went through the antler. And up here is what hit the cinder block. That's pretty darn tough. I really thought everything was going to be worse than that. So in terms of edge toughness, I feel like this stuff does... Now this is with my heat treatment. I don't know what anybody else's knives in this, except for Benchmade. Benchmade's chips out pretty easy, but this is pretty darn good. And honestly, I didn't know if it would be quite this good. It looks like the antler did slow down the edge just a little bit. Can still take some hair, but it's lost a little bit of its bite. Let's go ahead and just do the whole blade just to see. So could you get away with this in a hard situation? Yes, this would still work even in a hard situation. Would this be ideal though, to have all this edge damage? Not ideal, but you could make it go. So there. So, in my opinion, is this as tough as A2 or CPM 154cm? With my heat treatment, it's pretty close. So I think that I'll just call it a pass on the antler chop test. The antler chop test did nearly nothing to the knife at all. The cinder block test did a bit more damage. This is a very thin knife. This is 0.1 inches thick. Most of the knives that I use in this test are 0.15, and the 0.15 inch knives have done better than that, but I'm going to have some of these coming in that are 0.15 that I'll make, or the steel's going to be 0.15 inches, and then I'll make the knives and we'll test it then. But I mean, that's not too bad.